next chapter of Moby Dick, because I haven't read that in a long time. A nice cappuccino as well. How are you doing? Nice to have you back. So all the previous chapters are on my YouTube channel, which you can find in my link tree. linktree.com/A9630, and all the different places there, YouTube and Twitter and Buy Me a Coffee and all of that. Hello, Tanya. Hello, Dylan. Well, so, do you remember where we were? We're just kind of about to get to the most exciting part and see how far through we are. It's taken a while to read, but it's very exciting. I'm really enjoying it. It's another good song. Summer Breeze by the Isley Brothers, I think. Hopefully YouTube won't give me a copyright strike. But anyway, right. Chapter 42, The Whiteness of the Whale. Hopefully it's not going to be too loud. So I'll bring it closer. I'll bring the mic closer so you can hear me properly. Right, the whiteness of the whale. What the white whale was to Ahab has been hinted. What at times he was to me, as yet remains unsaid. Aside from those more obvious considerations touching Moby Dick, which could not but occasionally awaken in any man's soul some alarm, there was another thought, or rather vague, nameless horror concerning him, which at times by its intensity completely overpowered all the rest, and yet so mystical and well-nigh ineffable was it, that I almost despair of putting it in a comprehensible form. It was the whiteness of the whale that above all things appalled me. But how can I hope to explain myself here, and yet in some dim, random way explain myself I must, else all these chapters might be naught. Tanya? We're here, yeah, might be. Though in many natural objects, whiteness refiningly enhances beauty, as if imparting some special virtue of its own, as in marbles, japonicas, and pearls, and though various nations have in some way recognized a certain royal preeminence in this hue, even the barbaric grand old kings of Pegu, placing the title of Lord of the White Elephants above all the other magniloquent ascriptions of dominion, and the modern kings of Siam unfound the same snow-white quadruped in the royal standard, and the Hanoverian flag bearing one figure of a snow-white charger, and the great Austrian Empire, Caesarian, heir to overlording Rome, having for the imperial colour the same imperial hue. Lost the place. And though this preeminence in it applies to the human race itself, giving the white man ideal mastership over every dusky tribe, obviously, I do not endorse the opinions here, you understand. And it's very much, just as an aside, it's very much a complex picture of different races in the book. But it was written very much in its time. Anyway, the dusky hue thing. Dusky tribe, and though, beside all this, whiteness has been even made significant of gladness, for among the Romans a white stone marked a joyful day, and though in other mortal sympathies and symbolizings, the same hue is made the emblem of many touching noble things, the innocence of brides, the benignity of age, though even among the red men of America, the giving of the white belt of wampum was the deepest pledge of honour. Though in many climes, whiteness typifies the majesty of justice in the ermine of the judge, and contributes to the daily state of kings and queens drawn by milk-white steeds, though even in the higher mysteries of the most august religions it has been made the symbol of the divine spotlessness and power. By the Persian fire worshippers, the white forked flame being held the holiest on the altar, and in the Greek mythologies, the great Jove himself being made incarnate in a snow-white bull, and though to the noble Iroquois, the midwinter sacrifice of the sacred white dog was by far the holiest festival of their theologies, that spotless, faithful creature being held the purest envoy they could send to the Great Spirit with the annual tidings of their own fidelity. And though directly from the Latin word for whiteness, all Christian priests derive the name of one part of their sacred vesture, the alb, or tunic, worn beneath the cassock, and though among the high pomps of the Roman faith, white is especially employed in the celebration of the Passion of our Lord, though in the vision of St. John, white robes are given to the redeemed, and the 24 elders stand clothed in white before the great white throne, and the Holy One that sitteth there white like wool. Yet for all these accumulated associations, with whatever is sweet and honourable and sublime, there yet lurks an elusive something in that innermost idea of this hue, which strikes more of panic to the soul than that redness which affrights in blood. This elusive quality it is which causes the thought of whiteness, when divorced from more kindly associations, and coupled with any object terrible in itself, to heighten that terror to the farthest bounds. Whiteness, the white witness the white bear of the poles, and the white shark of the tropics, where but their smooth, flaky whiteness makes them the transcendent horrors they are. That ghastly whiteness it is which imparts such an abhorrent mildness, even more loathsome than terrific to the dumb gloating of their aspect, so that not the fierce-fanged tiger in his heraldic coat can so stagger courage as the white-shrouded bear or shark. Bethink thee of the albatross, whence those clouds of spiritual wonderment and pale dread in which that white phantom sails in all imaginations. Not Coleridge, first through that spell, but God's great unflattering laureate, Nature. Our most famous in our Western annals and Indian traditions is that of the white steed of the prairies, a magnificent milk-white charger, large-eyed, small-headed, bluff-chested, with the dignity of 1,000 monarchs in his lofty, over-scorning carriage. He was the elected Xerxes of the vast herds of wild horses, whose pastures in those days were only fenced by the Rocky Mountains and the Alleghanies. At their flaming head he westward trooped it like that chosen star which every evening leads on the hosts of light. The flashing cascade of his mane, the curving comet of his tail, invested him with housings more resplendent than gold and silver beaters could have furnished him. A most imperial and archangelical aspiration of that unfallen western world, which to the eyes of the old trappers and hunters revived the glories of those primeval times when Adam walked majestic as a god, bluff-browed and fearless as this mighty steed. Whether marching amid his aides and marshals in the van of glory of countless cohorts that endlessly streamed it over the plains like an Ohio, or whether with his circumambient subjects browsing all around at the horizon, the white steed gallopingly reviewed them with warm nostrils, reddening through his cruel milkiness. Thank you, Jules. In whatever aspect he presented himself. Always to the bravest Indians he was the object of trembling reverence and awe. Nor can it be questioned that from what stands on legendary record of this noble horse, that it was his spiritual whiteness chiefly which so clothed him with divineness, and that this divineness had that in it which, though commanding worship, at the same time enforced a certain nameless terror. From Freddy. Thank you, Freddy. Dankeschön. Dankeschön, meine kleine Freunde. But there are other instances where this whiteness loses all that accessory and strange glory which invests in it the white steed and albatross. What is it that in that albino man so peculiarly repels and often shocks the eye, as that sometimes he is loathed by his own kith and kin? It is that whiteness which invests him a thing expressed by the name he bears. The albino is as well made as other men, but has no substantive deformity, and yet this mere aspect of all-pervading whiteness makes him more strangely hideous than the ugliest abortion. Why should this be so? That's a bit harsh, isn't it? It's a little bit harsh. Nor, in quite other aspects, does nature, in her least palpable but not the less malicious agencies, fail to enlist among her forces this crowning attribute of the terrible. From its snowy aspect, the gauntleted ghost of the South Seas has been denominated the White Squall. Nor, in some historic instances, has the art of human malice admitted so potent an auxiliary. How wildly it heightens the effect of that passage in Froissart, when Froissart, Froissart, when massed in the snowy symbol of their faction, the desperate White Hoods of Ghent murder their bailiff in the marketplace. Nor in some things does the common hereditary experience of all mankind fail to bear witness to the supernaturalism on this hue. It cannot be well doubted that the one visible quality in the aspect of the dead which most appalls the gazer is the marble pallor lingering there, as if indeed that pallor were as much like the badge of consternation in the other world as of mortal trepidation here. And from that pallor of the dead we borrow the expressive hue of the shroud in which we wrap them. Nor even in our superstitions do we fail to throw the same snowy mantle round our phantoms, all ghosts rising in a milk-white fog. Thank you again, John. Yet while these terrors seize us, let us add that even the king of terrors, when personified by the evangelist, rides on his pallid horse. Therefore, in his other moods symbolize whatever grand or gracious thing he will by whiteness, no man can deny that in its profoundest idealized significance it calls up a peculiar apparition to the soul. But, though, without dissent, this point be fixed, it is house mortal men to account for it. To analyse it would seem impossible. Can we, then, by the citation of some of those instances, wherein this thing of whiteness, though for the other time wholly or in great part trapped of all direct associations, calculated to impart to it aught fearful, but nevertheless it found to exert over us the same sorcery, however modified, can we thus hope to light upon some chance clue to conduct us to the hidden cause we seek? Let us try. But in a matter like this, subtlety appeals to subtlety, and without imagination no man can follow another into these halls. And though doubtless some at least of the imaginative impressions about to be presented may have been shared by most men, yet few perhaps were entirely conscious of them at the time, and therefore may not be able to recall them now. Why, to the man of untutored ideality, who happens to be but loosely acquainted with the peculiar character of the day, does the bare mention of Whitsuntide marshal in the fancy such long, dreary, speechless processions of slow-pacing pilgrims, downcast and hooded with newly fallen snow? Or to the unread and unsophisticated Protestant of a middle American state, why does the passing mention of a white friar or a white nun evoke such an eyeless statue in the soul? Just have a sip of coffee. Thank you, Sharon. Again. Or, what is there apart from the traditions of dungeon warriors and kings, which we will not wholly account for, that makes the White Tower of London tell so much more strongly on the imagination of an untravelled American than those other storied structures, its neighbours, the Byward Tower, or even the Bloody? And those sublimer towers, the White Mountains of New Hampshire, whence, in peculiar moods, comes that gigantic ghostliness of the soul at the bare mention of the name, while the thought of Virginia's Blue Ridge is full of a soft, dewy, distant dreaminess? Or why, irrespective of all latitudes and longitudes, does the name of the White Sea exert such a spectralness over the fancy, while that of the Yellow Sea lulls us with immortal thoughts of long lacquered mild afternoons on the waves, followed by the gaudiest and yet sleepiest of sunsets? Or, to choose a wholly unsubstantiated instance, purely addressed to the fancy, why, in reading the old tales of Central Europe, does the tall, pale man of the Hartz forests, whose changeless pallor unrustlingly glides through the green of the groves, why is this phantom more terrible than all the whooping imps of the Blocksberg? Nor is it, altogether, the remembrance of her cathedral-toppling earthquakes, nor the stampedos of her frantic seas, nor the tearlessness of arid skies that never rain, nor the sight of her wild field of leaning spires, wrenched copestones, and crosses all adroop like canted yards of anchored fleets, and her suburban avenues of house walls lying over upon each other, or as a tossed pack of cards. It is not these things alone which make tearless Lima the strangest, saddest city thou canst see. Ekishan. For Lima has taken the white veil, and there is a higher horror in this whiteness of her woe. Old as Pizarro, this whiteness keeps her ruins forever now, admits not the cheerful greenness of complete decay, spreads over her broken ramparts the rigid pallor of an apoplexy that fixes its own distortions. I know that, to the common apprehension, this phenomenon of whiteness is not confused to be the terrible agent in exaggerating the terror of objects otherwise terrible, nor to the unimaginative mind is it there aught of terror in those appearances whose awfulness to another mind almost solely consists of this one phenomenon, especially when exhibited under any form at all approaching to muteness or universality. What I mean by those two statements may perhaps be respectively elucidated by the following examples. First, the mariner. When drawing nigh the coasts of foreign lands, if by night he hears the roar of breakers, starts to vigilance, and feels just enough of trepidation to sharpen all his faculties, but under precisely similar circumstances, let him be called from his hammock to view his ship sailing through the midnight sea of milky whiteness, as if from encircling headlands shoals of combed white bears were swimming round him. Then he feels a silent, superstitious dread. The shrouded phantom of the whitened waters, so horrible to him as a real ghost. In vain the lead assures him he is stiff of his surroundings. Heart and helm, they both go down. He never rests till blue water is again under him. Yet where is the mariner who will tell thee, sir, it is not so much the fear of striking hidden rocks as the fear of that hideous whiteness that so stirred me. Second, to the native Indian of Peru, the continual sight of the snow-howdahed Andes convoys naught of dread, except perhaps in the mere fancying of the eternal frosted desolateness reigning at such vast altitude, and the natural conceit of what a fearfulness it would be to lose oneself in such inhumane solitude. Much the same as it is with the backwoodsman of the West, who with comparative indifferent views as an unbounded prairie sheeted with driven snow, no shadow of trees or twig to break the fixed trance of whiteness. Not so the sailor, beholding the scenery of the Antarctic seas, where at times by some infernal trick of legerdemain in the powers of frost and air, he, shivering and half shipwrecked, instead of rainbows speaking hope and solace to his misery, views that scene with a boundless churchyard grinning upon him with its lean ice monuments and splintered crosses. But thou sayest, methinks, the white-lead chapter about whiteness is but a white flag hung out from a craven soul. Thou surrenderest to a hypo, Ishmael. Tell me, why this strong young colt, foaled in some peaceful valley of Vermont, far removed from all beasts of prey, why is it that upon the sunniest of days, if you but shake a fresh buffalo robe behind him, so that he cannot even see it, but only smells its wild animal and muskness, why will he start, snort, and with bursting eyes paw the ground in frenzies of affright? There is no remembrance of him any gorings of wild creatures in his green northern home, so that strange muskiness he smells cannot recall to him anything associated with the experience of former perils for what he knows. This New England colt of the black bisons of distant Oregon? No, but here thou behildst, even in a dumb brute, the instincts of the knowledge of the demonism of the wild. There's thousands of miles from Oregon, still he smells that savage musk. The rending, goring bison herds are as present as to the deserted wild foal of the prairies, which this instinct there may be trampled into dust. Thus, then, the muffled rollings of a milky sea, the bleak rustlings of the festooned frosts of mountains, the desolate shiftings of the windrowed snows of prairies, all these to Ishmael are as shaking of that buffalo robe to the frightened colt. Though neither knows where lies the nameless things of which the mystic sign gives forth such hints, yet with me, as with the colt, somewhere those things must exist. Though in many of its aspects this visible world seems formed in love, the invisible spheres were formed in fright. But not yet have we solved the incantation of this whiteness, and learned why it appeals with such power to the soul, and more strange and far more portentous, why, as we have seen, is it that once that most meaning symbol of spiritual things, nay, the very veil of the Christian's deity, and yet should be as it is the intensifying agent in things that are most appalling to mankind. It is by that indefiniteness it shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe, and thus stabs us from behind with the thought of annihilation, when beholding the white depths of the Milky Way? Or is it that that as in essence whiteness, which is not so much a colour of the visible absence of colour, as it is the concrete of all the colours, as it is for the reasons that there is such a dumb blankness, full of meaning, in a wide landscape of snows, a colourless all-colour of atheism from which we shrink. And when we consider that other theory of the natural philosophers, that all other earthly hues, every state are lovely emblazoning, the sweet tinges of sunset skies and woods, and yea, and the gilded velvets of butterflies and the butterfly cheeks of young girls, all these are but subtle deceits, not actually inherent in substances, but only laid on from without, so that all deified nature absolutely paints like the harlot, whose allurements cover nothing but the charnel house within. And when we proceed further and consider that the mystic cosmetic which produces every one of her hues, the great principle of light, forever remains white or colourless in itself, and if operating without medium upon matter, would touch all objects, even tulips and roses, with its own blank tinge. Pondering all this, the palsied universe lies before us a leper, and like wilful travellers in Lapland who refuse to wear coloured and colouring glasses upon their eyes, so the wretched infidel gazes himself blind at the monumental white shroud that wraps all the prospect around him. And of all these things the albino whale was the symbol. Wonder ye then at the fiery hunt. End of chapter 42. Wow, who could write an entire chapter like that just about whiteness, about all of its meanings? That's an amazing chapter, I think. All that imagery in there. Bring in so many different cultures and religions and times. Wow, it was an amazing chapter. Didn't you? Did you think it was boring? I thought it was quite brilliant. Such a long and in-depth thought about the power and the fear, the fearsomeness of whiteness. I think what he could have done, though, I think what he could easily have done is he could have taken the perspective of other races. He could have talked about Kikeg, for example, and said how the coming of the white man was so terrifying to many people. And he could have done that. Probably didn't, because it would have alienated his audience, or well, maybe hadn't thought to do it. But interesting, I thought, really interesting chapter that. Yeah, very interesting. Right, well, hopefully we'll be able to broadcast again each week from the Cloud House, each Thursday afternoon. That'd be lovely if we could do that, and have lunch and a chapter or two of Moby Dick. So as I said before, all of these readings and other books as well, like Treasure Island, which I really enjoyed, or Frankenstein, they're on my YouTube, so you can go onto my YouTube. It's easy to find it, just in the link tree there. Go onto my YouTube and read with me, listen to previous chapters and other books. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can listen to me live and interact with me on Haps. If you go onto the haps.tv website or download the Haps app onto your phone or tablet, and you can type to me directly and interact with other people as well. You can even send me some awards to actually pay me if you wanted to do that. Don't have to, of course. You never have to. Nobody ever has to. But if you want to, you could, because if you sign up with Haps, you get a few free coins to send to me or anyone else. Right, that'll do. Got time, right. So I'll see you. I'll not read another chapter. I think one chapter is sufficient for today, because that was a really good and interesting chapter, I thought. But I will see you next time. And incidentally, if you're watching on Haps, you can follow Tonya there, because she does something similar, except she, very, very impressively, she reads books in French and then in English. So she's been reading The War of the Worlds, and before that, The Little Prince, isn't it, the Petit Prince, and other books, I believe. So follow Tonya. So thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for the awards again. Thanks for starting this. Yeah, I thought you'd finished it. That's right. Yeah. But thanks for being here. Thanks for your comments. Hope you enjoyed it. Go back and re-watch it, perhaps. And I'll see you all next time. Cheerio, bye, everyone. Have a nice Thursday afternoon.